Thank you, Bernard. So today we are gathered from many places to hear and learn from a number of really interesting people. So we're here for a truly special gathering. It really is a chance to explore the heart of what makes communities compassionate, resilient, and connected. Our panelists come from diverse backgrounds. We've got all of the various schools, almost all of the traditions of Buddhism represented, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, each bringing a unique perspective on community, kindness, compassion, and care. Today, we'll hear about how compassion and human connection can be fostered in our educational systems, artistic expression, through spiritual practices, and even in digital spaces, and how we can get from where we are now, here in this time and place, to a much more compassionate future. Each speaker brings not only their expertise, but also their deep commitment to uplifting others, whether through education, art, interfaith work, Dharma teaching, or digital innovation. They're all working to create a world where compassion is a guiding principle and a lived experience. Thank you once again for being part of this gathering, and thank you to our speakers for sharing their insights with us. I'll just let you know who's going to be with us today. We have Venerable Dr. Juewei from the Humanistic Buddhism Center at Tien Institute. We have Associate Professor Tam Ha from University of Wollongong. We have Bernard Kelly Edwards, First Nations person and multimedia artists. We have Bhante Dhammika, Australian monk from Queensland. And we have the very Venerable Thubten Chokyi from the FPMT. I'll now hand you over to our first speaker, Venerable Dr. Juewei. But before she gives her presentation, which is called MettāVerses, Building Communities of Kindness, I'd like to tell you a little bit about her. Venerable Dr. Juewei is Director of the Humanistic Buddhism Center at Tien Institute and leads NTI's Applied Buddhist Studies and Humanistic Buddhism programs. She holds advanced degrees in religious studies, Buddhist studies, business administration, and computer science. Her recent research publications include a journal article called A Reflection on the Humanism in the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, and an edited book called Cultivating Compassion, Going Beyond Crises, published by Peter Lang earlier this year. And there will be a book discussion about that book immediately after this panel. Venerable Juewei also serves on the editorial board for Studies on Humanistic Buddhism, a journal, and leads various projects, including the Humanistic Buddhism Special Interest Group and MettāVerses. Venerable Juewei's research focuses on humanistic Buddhism, Buddhist ethics, and Buddhism's role in modern society, including AI, or artificial intelligence. She is also an active member of Fo Guangsheng monastic order. And now I'd like you all to welcome Venerable Dr. Juewei.
Hey, thank you so much, Pema, and hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm going to outline what I hope to be an inspiring project that can lead us out of the burning house that the Buddha talked about in the Lotus Sutra that I made a brief reference to during the opening of this colloquium. I created a term called MettāVerses in 2021 during the 8th International Symposium on Humanistic Buddhism. At that time, I just wanted to respond to Facebook's launch of the metaverse. Instead of a digital future where humans appear behind avatars, I wanted to apply my teacher's advocacy to connect human hearts with loving kindness and compassion. Hence, MettāVerses, where the Pali word metta means loving kindness, and verses meaning being short for multiverses or communities. This initiative aims to educate communities about the benefits of loving kindness and provide both online and in-person communities with resources to foster a culture of kindness, helping people feel connected and supported in a way that counters the social isolation many of us face today. At its core, MettāVerses is about educating communities on the value of creating spaces where loving kindness is not only practiced, but also celebrated. Rooted in the concept of metta, this project draws from the Buddha's teachings on cultivating a gentle, friendly wish for others to be well. This extends beyond individual benefit to a broader societal impact, as each participant in the MettāVerses community can be encouraged to bring these values into their own lives, ultimately uplifting those around them. We hope to provide research and conduct our own research to support our mission. And this particular colloquium I see is also an initiative in the MettāVerses. So as part of the initial development, a feasibility study was conducted early this year to understand how best to achieve MettāVerses' mission. The feasibility study included an online survey. This survey highlighted both the interest in and the potential impact of an online platform focused on loving kindness. The research underscored the real demand for a website and some associated in-person, community-oriented events that encourage kindness, well-being, and interpersonal connection. So based on the positive results of this study, the MettāVerses project moved forward. And we are very happy now to say that we are able to launch soon a dedicated website offering a wealth of resources and information to engage site visitors. So let me try to walk you through some of the key sections. The About page introduces visitors to the concept of metta and offers insights into how this quality can be developed in daily life. It also provides an overview of the project's mission and vision, setting the stage for visitors to understand the core values that drive MettāVerses. There's also a research page where visitors can dive into findings of the feasibility study and related research. This section offers a window into the project's evidence-based approach and highlights why initiatives like MettāVerses are so vital in today's world. Metta Festival is one of the most exciting aspects of this project. It will be a multi-location celebration of loving kindness and well-being. The festival, we hope, will be held in November 2025, a year from now, and will be our answer to survey respondents' wish for community-based kindness events. The Metta Festival page on the website details the festival's events, both online and in person, inviting people from all backgrounds to participate and connect. We also have a media section that's still under development. It will be a collection of podcasts, talks, interviews, discussions, and other resources that explore the benefits of kindness. This will be a great resource for anyone looking to deepen their understanding or simply be inspired by real stories of compassion in action. Just in this colloquium alone, I've heard so many powerful stories. So watch out. I'll be knocking on your virtual door to ask for an interview with you. We also have a resources page that offers a variety of downloadable materials, such as images, quotes, Dharma teachings, and posters that can be shared to spread kindness and positivity. MettāVerses encourages community involvement. So we also have a volunteer and contacts page to make it easy for anyone interested to reach out, ask questions, or become a volunteer. In the last panel, we spoke about the challenges of looking for volunteers. So we hope that for those of you who do wish to volunteer, do let us know and use our pages to get in touch. By creating this website, MettāVerses has made its mission more accessible, allowing people around the world to participate, whether they're attending a live event or simply browsing resources at home. This is just the beginning. The motivation comes from my teacher, the late Venerable Master Xing Yun, who tells us constantly that it's okay if we don't get enlightened. It's okay that we are not very clever. But what's most important is that we must be kind and compassionate. Therefore, our hope is that we can expand our reach with community partners and deepen our research with other institutes with similar visions, so that kindness and compassion can be the first go-to for everybody. I'm confident that the MettāVerses will work because our weekly online Sunday check-in sessions run by the Tien Institute have now reached 206 episodes. We've gone non-stop since the COVID-19 pandemic. And this community has connected every week to develop this habit of a pause, to cultivate our practices and build memorable friendships. Where there is a human need, the wheel of the Dharma will turn. Thank you for your time, and I encourage you to visit our MettāVerses online to explore how you can become a part of this initiative and offer us any feedback to make our future kinder and more compassionate. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Juewei. For those who are interested in asking Venerable Juewei some questions about MettāVerses or just having a chat about that, we will be having a roundtable discussion at the end of this panel. So stay tuned for that. We are now going to move on to our next eminent speaker, Associate Professor Tam Ha, for her presentation, Our Students, Our Future. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about Associate Professor Tam Ha. She is an internationally recognized public health educator who is involved in teaching epidemiology and conducting cancer epidemiology research to improve outcomes for populations and society. She is passionate about helping the next generation, specifically students, to achieve beyond their full potential, and has created personal teaching strategies and apps that systematically assist students from diverse backgrounds to succeed. She has won 6 teaching awards, national and international awards, including the most prestigious National Teaching Award in Australia this year, the Australian Awards for University Teaching, or the AAUT. Over to you, Professor Tam Ha.
Thank you so much, Pema, and welcome everyone. It is so amazing to see so many happy faces on a Sunday morning where I am in New South Wales at the moment. Thank you very much for joining us today. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. I have always been interested in teaching and in students, as well as in cancer research. Cancer is one of those areas which, by and large, it happens sporadically, which means we can't really link it definitively to a particular cause. And academia is not one of those areas for the faint-hearted. It is a difficult career track, full of challenges. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to pursue this, I'm going to try and help as many people as possible, which is how I ended up doing epidemiology. How is it that I can help big populations improve their cancer outcomes? And with the other interests of helping students. Students have always fascinated me. They really are our next generation. They are our future. And I always felt that anybody could learn. There was no such thing as a slow student or an incompetent student. Everyone could learn, and everyone's got their own skill sets. So what is it that was holding students back from succeeding? Was it the teaching strategy? Was it the teacher? Was it the environment? What was it? So that's how I ended up being an academic. And up to the point that I came back to Wollongong, I had always taught at a medical school. So the students were very different, as you can imagine, highly motivated, turning up early to class, coming to extra classes. I've had students who've had surgery and they've come up to class the next day with, you know, a big puffy face, and they're still there doing their very best. But it was the students here in Australia who are very diverse. So I thought to myself, what is it that I could do to help them succeed? As I progressed in my career, I realized that it was more than just helping students succeed academically. I mean, sure, that was great that they passed their exams and then they could graduate and pursue their careers. But it was much more than that. To create compassionate societies, I really had to help students achieve more than the current society, because society can only improve when our students are much better than the current society. And the most precious gift that I could give my students was the gift of believing in themselves. I could believe in them for sure, but it was them to believe in themselves and to achieve so much more than they think that they can achieve. Will they then have the courage, the strength, the vision to deal with the future healthcare problems, which we apparently will not know at this point in time? So we've had COVID-19, but COVID-30 is around the corner. By that time, I'm going to be in a rocking chair. My teeth are going to be a bit loose. My vision's going. I'm not going to be able to walk properly. And my students are going to be up there every single day dealing with our future healthcare problems, which we have no idea what they're going to be. And I want to look back and say, I'm proud that they're my students. I'm proud that they took on those challenges. So I encourage them. How is it that they can achieve that courage? How is it that they can relink their priorities for our future? So I would start off with things like, all of us are 75% water and about $10 worth of chemicals. If they can do it, so can you. Anthony Fauci's not going to be around. He's already retired. Mary Louise McLaws, who headed, the WHO, one of the members who headed the WHO workforce for COVID, she's passed away from a brain tumor. Who is it that's going to be leading our future? And it is our students. And as I created apps, teaching strategies, which to some degree did help my students succeed, what I found, though, which helped them to succeed much more, was really kindness and compassion. This year, I had the great fortune of being the head of students for the entire school. And that role is a very interesting role. That role is where you get to see students who are the weakest, who are the most challenged, who have failed, who've got all sorts of problems that I had not even envisaged until I took on that role. I had never seen students receive all zeros before. Never, ever seen that. And initially it was, okay, so how do I help you pass? You failed this. What is the plan? How do we get you back on your feet? But as I progressed in the role, it wasn't simply that helped them. And as more students came to me with very difficult challenges, just listening to them really deeply, despite what I thought personally about their situation, being able to acknowledge and reflect on their circumstances and their challenges. And I had one particular student this year who was in a really difficult place. And, I was really concerned for her. I'd stayed back. We put things in place to support her. Everything she said couldn't be done. It was too difficult. We came back with things that are not part of an academic's role. For example, so not particularly in this case, but for example, driving them to healthcare appointments, giving them food, giving them a little bit of finances to help them through, as some examples of non-academic activities. And we checked in on her regularly. And to my surprise, she came back. I was not expecting her to turn back to class, to come to class so soon. And she turned up, to my surprise, a few days later, and she said she didn't think she could either, but it was because we cared. We sincerely cared about her, and she felt it, that she was able to rise again and continue her journey on in life, to continue what she'd wanted to pursue, and she never gave up. So to me, creating compassionate futures is not simply about, the next app or the next teaching strategy or the next award or the typical societal milestones for success. Not at all, actually. It was simply listening so deeply and caring about people that created that compassionate future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tam, that was really great. And just a reminder, everyone, we're going to have a roundtable discussion at the end, so we can ask Associate Professor Tam Haas some questions then. So now we are moving on to our next speaker. And once again, before we move on, I'd like to introduce you to them. Our next speaker is Bernard Kelly Edwards, who is a multimedia artist working with paint, film, photography, storytelling, poetry, and digital art. Bernard belongs to Gumbaynggirr, Bundjalung, and Junguti nations on the mid-north coast of New South Wales and continues to live in Gumbaynggirr. Always inspired by Wajah and Dawandi, or Country and Reflections, Bernard's work entails finding a voice for the patterns of country and their meaning in the connection space of our existence. He loves sitting in forest and beach landscapes, allowing country to share its essence with him. Blending his art with facilitated workshops, Bernard finds a deeper connection with groups and individuals who themselves gain greater understanding of the importance of connecting and exploring who they are and where they are at in this world. Bernard will be playing a video with his presentation today, but before we play that, I'll just hand over to Bernard to introduce what he's doing.
Pema, thank you very much. And Yinagay Najawan, hello everybody. Today I'm going to share a creative video created by myself where you'll see visuals of photography, artwork and digital art blended with audio that I've created. And I'm going to be reading a poem called Keeping the Fire Burning. So Pema, you can start that video. Thank you, brother. This poem is a message to the world we live in. A world that has shown a developed humanness filled with greed and deception, somehow held up by compassion, kindness and love. That somehow I speak about is the space between greed and deception. Compassionate beings doing the work of love, peace and humanity. Ancient practices forever handed down from the living palms of love, the ruler of all things living. We are constantly reminded of this when we step out of cement city buildings into grass fields of dreams, rainbows full of light and colour that overpower greed and deception. Very simple reminders. Keeping the fire burning is always about evolving consciousness to a higher purpose, whether that's chopping wood and carrying water or sitting in our own breath, focusing on awareness, balance and integration. Holding a patient line as the embers ascend to the stars is what needs normalizing in this present day we operate
Recording
ourselves.
in progress.
Allowing love and compassion and empathy to seep from our pores into the life of living beings, birds, trees, turtles, and the seas. Us as human beings have full control of what a compassionate future looks like for our descendants' generation. A generation that will always keep our fires burning through cultural practices, handing down the evolutionary timeline of love itself. Mother Earth will always be a place where love and compassion operate. As the planet rotates, so does Father Time. Each shadow cast plays its role in each sunrise and casting sunset. To our creators, give us all the strength and wisdom to keep our fires burning. Keep mending our heartbeats as we share this time and place with many other like-minded family members in solidarity for a compassionate future for all things living. Allow us to voice from our hearts the truth that will only set everyone free from the shackles of suppression. Give us the awareness as we step into our being, full of hope and commitment to ourselves, then pass love onto our fellow loved ones. Bring our sight closer to the light of love as we embark on our own journey, collecting our inner child along the way to sustaining our path to enlightenment for all things living within every heartbeat, keeping the fire burning. This poem was written 2 hours before this gathering, and allowing myself to be present during my process to allow this to flow, I needed to be still. These visuals remind me of stillness here on Gumbangri Wajal. There are times where there's nothing at all apart from being present. Watching the wind flow through these trees reminds me of letting go of attachment, for wind cannot attach itself to anything. Fires and trees remind me of regrowth of life, a place that we all embark on, whether we like it or not. Out of that place becomes growth, just like the rebirth of little seedlings from burnt embers. We keep this fire burning for our next generation, looking back to our awareness of our past. We hold patience as we gather information, collating and collecting what we know of who we are and where we come from, so we know where we're going. And where we're going is within the grasp of our own destiny, something that we know as choices. Choices that take us down pathways of learning, listening, and behaving in a better way for no other apart from ourselves. Watching country as Dawandi and Wajal care and show me the real beauty of what humanity is always about. I just want to take this moment to thank Pema, the Institute, and everybody that is here at this present moment to share. I much appreciate it, and on behalf of myself and my ancestors and my descendants, Nyaya Gumbangara Jagun Wajal, Nyaya Banjalang Jangari Niga, Darangdang Gumbangara Wajal, Darangdang Gumbangara Wage. I say thank you to the homelands of the Gumbangri Nation, to the fires held by Gumbangri people. Darangdang Najal, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernard. That was really beautiful. Really appreciate that. Really, really appreciate that. All right, everyone, after that extraordinary moment we just shared, we'll take a break of 10 minutes. I'm not going to tell you what time to come back because we're all on different time zones. So check your clocks now, please. And in 10 minutes, or maybe a little less than that because we're running slightly over time, we're in the same Zoom session here. Come back and we'll have our next speakers and the roundtable discussion. Thank you very much, people. I'll see you all soon. Welcome back from the break. We'll just take a little bit of time, maybe a minute, for the stragglers to return. Although based on the participant numbers, most people are back, but I can see quite a few cameras are turned off. So we'll just wait a little bit to get everyone back and then we'll resume. All right, everyone, thank you for returning from your breaks. We're now going to continue with our Pathways to Compassionate Futures panel. And next up, we have another esteemed guest, Bhante Dhammika, who will be giving a presentation called Compassion. What is it? Bhante is an Australian monk born in 1951. He became a monk in India in 1976, so what we might call an early adapter or an early adopter in terms of Australian monastics, Anglo monastics. Subsequently, he lived in Sri Lanka for 20 years and later in Singapore until 2017, after which he returned to Australia, where he now lives in semi-retirement. Bhante has written numerous books and articles on Buddhist doctrine, its history and culture, which have been translated into more than 30 languages. So, warmly welcome, Bhante. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you for that. Probably most people, even people who don't know much about Buddhism, know that compassion is one of its cardinal virtues. And my understanding of Buddhism is what all schools of Buddhism, the early schools, Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, all pretty much agree on this matter, and they conceive compassion as being basically the same. However, I'm just going to talk about compassion as it is presented in the earliest Buddhist texts, that is the Pali texts. Now, in India at the time of the Buddha, the premier or the major Vedic Hindu god was Brahma. And this deity was conceived as having 4 faces and also 4 hands. And he was believed to abide above the clouds, and he would keep his eye on what was going on down on earth. And sometimes he would turn his face of love and look upon those who were nice people, virtuous people, good people, and he would turn his face of love to them. And then when he saw people who were grieving, suffering in some way, he would turn his face of compassion to them. And when he encountered people who were joyful, they were celebrating, they got a windfall, they were happy, he would turn his face of what is called in Buddhism sympathetic joy, and he would celebrate with them. And when he saw people who were nasty or evil or something, he wouldn't get angry like other supreme gods at that time in other parts of the world, but rather he would look upon them with his face of equanimity. And apparently this idea of a divine being having these 4 attributes seemed to have struck a chord with the Buddha. And so he included he modified that idea. He took the God out of it, and he presented this idea of 4 Brahma Viharas, Brahma meaning the supreme God, Vihara meaning a place to abide. So we can call it, say, the 4 supreme abidings or the 4 godlike states. And these are love, sometimes loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, sympathetic joy, mudita, and equanimity, upekkha. And these were seen as not necessarily 4 separate states, but 4 skillful ways of relating to people in different situations. So I will talk specifically now about karuna, the second of these, compassion. Now, if you look at the English word compassion, it comes from 2 Latin words, com and passio. And com means with or together, and passio means to suffer. So it means to suffer with another, to get out of yourself and enter into the feelings of others. And in this case, sad feelings of grief or sorrow or suffering. So empathy would be, the word empathy would be getting out of yourself and entering into any feeling that somebody has. So if you see, for example, a baby laughing, chances are quite spontaneously you'll at least smile. You may very well laugh with them. This is because you have empathy for them. But compassion or karuna is identifying with or connecting with people who are suffering. So the English term and the English understanding of what compassion is would be approximately the same as the ancient Buddhist one. And in Pali language, you've got several different words for slightly different modalities of compassion. So there is empathy, udayatta, and then there is commiseration, daya. Then there is fellow feeling, udagata, and then there is sympathy or empathy, which is anukampa. So, but primarily these are just slightly different modalities of the same state. And compassion is said to have 4 characteristics, at least as the Buddha understood it. The first one is it is abundant, vipalena. It is completely full. It engages with the other who is suffering fully, not just partially. It is exalted or made great or become great, mahagatena. And it is, and I think this is one of the most important ones, it is immeasurable, apamadena. It has no borders. It is unreserved, identifying with others and reaching out in some way to alleviate their suffering. And also important is it is avirena. It is completely devoid of any ill will. And that is how Buddhism understands compassion. And if you think about it, there is many ways that we can do this. As a Buddhist monk, one of the things I sometimes have to do is go to funerals where you quite often see people heartbroken. And I, at least, always find it difficult to know what to say to them. You know, they've gone to a better place. That doesn't always make people feel better. And so I've often found that actually saying nothing, but relating to them with some gesture, taking their hand or putting your arm over their shoulder, or sometimes even crying or tearing up with them, is the one thing, at least, that you can do. And there are other things you can do, that you can reach out with material help. Sometimes you can just be there for them and listen to them as they unburden their grief. And of course, there are other things you can do, like you can join organizations that are helping people who are suffering beyond your personal reach. So people may join an organization that is helping people in a war zone or something like that. Although Buddhism doesn't really specifically say that, it tends to speak about compassion to us as we can do something directly to somebody that we have direct contact with. Now, I think that this is an important point. When I was about 18, like a lot of young Australians of my age at that time, we were very concerned about the war in Vietnam, and I did attend quite a lot of demonstrations outside the American embassy and what have you and that. And I was living in a place in Melbourne with some other young people, and used to go fairly regularly to protests. And one day I read in the paper that an elderly lady had died of cold. That is, she was already very frail and sick, and it was a very, very cold winter, and apparently she couldn't pay for her heating bills, and she went to sleep and she basically didn't wake up. She died of cold. And I was just about to flick to the next page when I noticed she was living in the same street that I was living in, just up the road, a few houses. And then I went back and read it, and I realized that I'd actually seen this woman several times going to, or particularly coming back with her shopping bags and struggling to carry these things. And this, coming to know this, had quite an effect upon me. It occurred to me that I was very, very passionate about, and sincerely passionate about what was happening in a country far, far from me, where sincerely my ability to be able to alleviate or at least stop some suffering was limited as an individual. And yet I had completely failed to notice somebody who I actually could have had perhaps even a life-saving effect upon, and yet I never saw her. It never occurred to me, despite the fact that I actually did see her. This had quite an impact upon me, and it continues to do so today. I think it is very important that each of us, as an individual and within a community, do what we can to promote kindness, but also to experience and to feel compassion for those who are less fortunate than us, but that it is very easy to be more concerned about something far from us, rather than where our ability to be able to make some important change, rather than situations that are right under our nose. And I think that's an important message to keep in mind when we're talking about compassion. Now, sometimes when Buddhists are talking about compassion, I've heard those listening to them say, hey, well, what about love? And the Buddha talks about love quite a lot, but the Buddhist tradition tends to emphasize compassion. And I would say the reason for this is the central focus of attention of Buddhism is dukkha. It's the first noble truth, suffering. We live in a world where we suffer, and the most appropriate response to suffering is to have karuna or compassion. That's, as I understand, how early Buddhism talks about compassion. Or I might just end, if I can, by saying I've written a book about this. It's actually about love. It's called Like Milk and Water Mixed, which is a phrase the Buddha used. When people are kindly, they blend together like milk and water mixed. It's called Milk and Water Mixed, and it is available from Pariyatti. You can see it online. I talk about 9 different types of love that the Buddha talked about. You may find it interesting.
Thank you very much, Bhante. That was excellent. And I've read the book that you just mentioned. It's a very good book. I can highly recommend it. Right, so we will move on now to our next esteemed speaker. And I'll just let you all know a little bit about her. She is Venerable Thubten Chokyi, and her topic is Building Compassionate Communities. Thubten Chokyi is resident teacher at Hayagriva Buddhist Centre in Perth and Tara Meditation Centre in Bunbury. She's the current chair of the Australian Sangha Association and spiritual advisor for Sakyadhita Australia. Chokyi ordained in the Tibetan tradition with Lama Zopa Rinpoche and represents FPMT monks and nuns in Australia and New Zealand. From 2010 through 2022, Chokyi was International Director of Liberation Prison Project. She's been active in interfaith dialogue since 2006, most recently through the Rainbow Interfaith Alliance in Western Australia and engagement with Indigenous communities. Now over to you, Venerable Thubten Chokyi.
Thank you so much, Pema. This is such a rich forum. I'm very delighted to be a participant. I'd like to start by paying my respects to the Noongar Nation as traditional owners and custodians of the country of Southwest Western Australia and acknowledging their continuing connection to land, water and community and extending that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples throughout this country. So talking about building compassionate communities, I guess one inspiration for this was the religious historian Karen Armstrong, who was instrumental in the initiative to establish a Charter of Compassion, and that was adopted internationally in 2010. So in a world of conflict, the Charter seeks to unite people in meaningful connections and shared purpose, embracing compassion, recognising our interconnectedness, our common ground, our interdependence. Its vision is to build a more inclusive, just and compassionate society. The Charter gives spiritual voices the opportunity to unite in the most authentic cry for peace. Compassion, as a guiding principle for business, for government leaders in the arts, in culture, the humanities, is especially needed at this time when the world is colliding into each other every day. At the first International Mind and Its Potential Conference, hosted by Vajrayana Institute in 2005, Geshe Dawa advised the mind scientists there of the need to put the electrodes to test activity at the heart chakra rather than testing brain activity during meditation. So sometime later, when this research did happen, it noted a significant response at the heart chakra before a brain response. And separate studies have shown that meditating on compassion for as little as 10 minutes a day for 2 weeks has a profound, powerful impact, much greater than meditating on the breath. As Charles Darwin noted, we human beings are hardwired for compassion. We can't help but help. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, described as a emissary of Buddha Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, Kuan Yin, Canon, however we label the Buddha of compassion, time and time again has stated compassion is what is most needed in the world today. So in Sydney, at one event, responding to the question, where does compassion kick in? His Holiness the Dalai Lama was not sure about the single-celled amoeba and definitely not mosquitoes. He lives in India, right? However, mammals naturally demonstrate spontaneous compassion and caring not just for their own clan or species even, but for other species other than their own. And then as humans, His Holiness reminds us to elevate ourselves above the animal realm. These are not claws. We don't have fangs. Our skin is soft. We're made to care for each other. So there are 3 key areas of the Charter of Compassion in terms of compassionate action, building relationship, collective action initiatives such as empathic dialogue cafes, nurturing authentic connection, working towards a shared goal. For example, and this is where I'll be this week, faith leaders uniting in the Australian religious response to climate change. So faith leaders coming together to share our messages around caring for the environment at a time while COP29 convenes in Azerbaijan. So in Bunbury, we'll be visiting each other's places of worship to pay our respects and honouring the land. I find myself in this space always returning to the Buddha's sutras warnings about when leaders allow criminality in the land and crops cease to flourish, and it has a great impact on the environment. And so we don't always think about ethical conduct impacting the environment, but the Buddha made that very clear and sent us warnings, and we see the results of unethical behaviour throughout the world today and of increasing conflict, war. So the other part in response to the Charter of Compassion is the Sangha circles initiated by Plum Village, and through the Australian Sangha Association, we also provided a platform to promote ongoing conversations around our common ground, around working for common good. You know, we can be inspired by many other initiatives, such as the Sea Care programs at the Centre of Compassion Studies at Stanford and the Greater Good Science research on the neuroscience of well-being, teaching skills to foster a resilient and compassionate society. So at Vajrayana Institute, we were fortunate to host all these organisations and many others over the past 20 years at the Happiness and Causes conferences in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. We moved around because His Holiness Dalai Lama said whenever he was in Australia, he'd talk at one of the conferences. So anyway, so now a lot of it's online, but still managed face-to-face, except during COVID. And it was interesting when those conferences started, you know, the quandary was in 2005, we're a Dharma centre, what are we doing putting on conferences? And as Geshe Thubten addressed us and said, this is the Dharma, this is Dharma in action. It could have been called Suffering and Its Causes, but nobody would come. But there we have the Four Noble Truths right there. While in Sydney, I was a participant in the Kids Kindness Project at Bronte Primary School, training kindness monitors from kindy up. They wore their cute red capes to look out for each other, looking for opportunities to notice where their peers were struggling, you know, carrying their books or helping them tie their shoelaces, or providing a hug where they looked sad or something going wrong, having some difficulty. And then alongside this, developing environmental kindness. And this was embedded across the whole curriculum areas. In California, Tara Redwood School at Land of Medicine Buddha, which is part of our FPMT, was the first model school internationally to implement creating compassionate cultures pedagogy, with programs for toddlers up to adults, training educators, training parents. And that's still going on today. And the third area of the Charter is creating sustainable social change rooted in compassion, in active participation in community activities to bridge divides and cultivate social cohesion. The vision of the Charter is peace by 2030. We've got a long way to go. However, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, if each child learnt to meditate, each child in the world learned at an early age to meditate in one generation, we would have world peace. Sounds simple, right? And then we see the world. So stressing the harmony of humanity, the theme of one of His Holiness his Beyond Religion tour was that human beings, physically, mentally, emotionally, we're all the same. This is why the Buddhist psychology works as equally today as it did 2,600 years ago. We are all the same. He proposed that living an ethical, happy, and spiritual life beyond religious divides, cultivating human values, giving full respect to religion, but beyond religion, presenting a vision of a global community based on understanding and mutual respect. The Charter for Compassion was recognised by the Australian Parliament in 2010 to spread the principle of compassion to our leaders and help make Australia a more compassionate society for all. More recently, the chair of the Charter for Compassion addressed the Sunshine Coast Council's aspiration to make Sunshine Coast a city of compassion. This is while I was there at Chenrezig Institute and participated in those dialogues. Meantime, now, on the other side of the country in Western Australia, Bunbury is one of the 7 cities and many smaller groups and towns in Australia organising programs around economic justice, homelessness, restorative justice, youth empowerment. So the Compassionate Communities Australia's mission is to respond with shared humanity and kindness to each person's pain, distress, their needs, encouraging us to look for the things we can do, however small we think they may be, to give comfort and relief. We don't wait to be asked because we already care. So one of my favourite practices is smiling and out in the community, and it has led to many wonderful interactions. When I first moved to WA in 2021, I was struck when I went to Bunbury. Of course, you go to Bunbury and what do? You go for walks along the beach. So I'd go for walks along the beach and I was struck by the kindness messages posted on the buildings along the beachfronts. So here in WA, in Bunbury, under the guidance of Professor Sama Un, who was the 2023 WA Person of the Year, she's the chair of palliative care at University of Western Australia. So the vision of the Southwest Western Australian communities is to build death-literate communities, socially connected and capable of giving practical action to care for each other through illness, death and grief. Building robust support networks, creating community connectors to connect with people who find themselves isolated or needing care, needing open conversations. So striving to create a culture where seeking and offering help is natural because it is innate to us, and natural and encourage creating the structures to enable that, intentionally creating more resilient communities. During COVID, we saw compassionate action go viral in the hearts and minds of communities globally. The Italian balcony singers, all those working on the front line day after day, places of worship providing food programs, sharing meals and support online. At Chenrezig Institute, we hosted an international weekly 24-hour prayer-a-thon to spread the coronavirus, great compassion. So undeniably, the impacts of COVID, social isolation, remain today. I was recently in Melbourne being reminded, because Melbourne was the most locked down city in the world, people still palpably feel the impact of that. Yet, globally, humans come together in compassionate, caring connection in so many creative ways. And we also saw that during COVID. The 2021 Mapping Cohesion report noted that societies faced with crisis may, for a time, experience increased cohesion as people respond to a common threat and through mutual support. On the other hand, they turn inwards, focusing on people to blame and searching for scapegoats. And we find ourselves in this space today. This month, the first National Strengthening Social Cohesion Conference was held in Western Sydney, and I was, just able to attend that, held in a context of international conflicts, abuse, poverty, discrimination issues, or the divisive issues affecting our communities. And what was a strong theme in all of the presentations, including those by government ministers, was the need for enhanced compassionate communities and the practice of kindness. So we have the establishment of an Office of Community Cohesion federally. We have special envoys at the moment, particularly within the Jewish and Muslim communities, in response to the fact that governments at all levels, and I learned this at the conference, have a responsibility to reduce resentment in their communities. All levels of government have that responsibility. In 2015, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was not allowed into South Africa to celebrate Desmond Tutu's birthday, Desmond Tutu instead went to see His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The result was a dialogue and the project now Mission Joy, finding happiness in troubled times. So both the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu lived through extreme hardship and continued to live with joy despite their circumstances. So this is their profound message to the world. And the Mission Joy project is something that everyone can participate in. That immeasurable joy is the most powerful emotion driver that we have in the world. His Holiness, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who sadly passed last year as well, reminded us constantly in everything we do, live with compassion, die with compassion, work with compassion, meditate with compassion, and when problems come, compassion, compassion, compassion. And I'll just end with a quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama: "My religion is simple. My religion is kindness." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Venerable. That was another really amazing presentation. We've just been spoiled for choice today. All right, we are now going to move directly into our roundtable discussion. So if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please pop them in the chat. We will call also for questions a little bit later, but we're going to start by getting all of the speakers ready to chat and have a conversation. All right, so there's no questions just yet, so I think I might ask one of my own questions. I wanted to go to Bernard. Just ask you, Bernard, if you could explain a little bit about your process of sitting in country and how that relates to your art, and in what ways you think art speaks to creating more compassionate futures.
Good question, Pema. When I was growing up in Gumbangri, I was immersed in a very colonial construct, and sometimes we'd go fishing and we'd go camping and we'd go living out on country. And what started to unfold was the patterns of leaves, the patterns of water when wind would impact water and light. And this started to evolve itself in how I operate today. And for me to escape the world as it is, I take my art tools with me out on country and sit and ask the creator of this land of Gumbangri, Yuladala, to bless me while I'm on country, and amazing things happen. the micro right through to the macro visuals appear. I focus a lot on shadow of person, reflection. There's three things that happen when your body is impacted by water. As you immerse yourself in water, your shadow shows you that you expand, you become distorted, and then you contract. And a lot of that is based around the philosophy of Dawandi, which is shadow of person and reflection. And my connection to country is a lineage connection with no time. It's always there. It'll always be there. My job is how do I listen to it, and how do I pick up messages from kookaburras, the wind, dragonflies, water dragons, dolphins, whales, sand, leaves, everything. And I blend all of that into an art form that speaks. Some of the visuals that you would have seen were photography of Gumbangri, my inner child playing in a dreaming state that takes me way beyond the impacts of colonialism here in this country. And they look like dreamscapes of a vast landscape with mountains off in the distance and country just teeming full of life, you know. So that's where I tend to go and play in that space.
That's great. Thank you very much, Bernard. So if anyone has any other questions, just get ready to ask them. You can send them through in the chat if you like. But I'm going to hand over now to Tam Ha, Associate Professor Tam Ha, who's going to challenge us with a little scenario.
Hi, everyone. So, we've all been talking today about compassion, and we would love to hear your views, because that would be compassionate to all of us as well, to learn and hear what you think. So let me pose this scenario. We know that times are tough. The economy is not great. There are a lot of people who are facing all sorts of challenges. There's a cost of living crisis at the moment. And many people are made redundant or losing their jobs because the economy isn't great. So just say in an organization, X number of staff have to be made redundant to keep things going, to keep things afloat, to keep the organization viable. So let me pose to you, who do you think should go first? Is it the oldest person in the team who has been there for a long time, who would have saved enough money for retirement? Should the decision be made for them to go first? Should it be the one that has the least financial commitments? So, for example, the ones who don't have children, or don't have a mortgage, or don't have to look after their family members? Is it the least competent one? So if they're not part of the team and they're not helping with the financial situation, should they go first? Or what about the most difficult one? The sociopath, the psychopath, the difficult one who nobody likes. Should we make a collective decision for them to go first? Or do you think it should be us? Should we show compassion and put up our hands to go first? So in that scenario, who do you think? Where does compassion lie, and who do you think should go first? Love to hear your thoughts. Be as creative and imaginative as possible.
Perhaps we could also call on the panelists to weigh in and talk about who they would send off first.
And no right or wrong answers, so please don't feel afraid. This is, there's compassion to all of you as well. But love to hear your thoughts.
I'll start the conversation going, if that's okay.
Sure, great. Thanks, Venerable Juewei.
Thanks, Tam. I always love your questions. They provoke us to think. And this particular one reminded me of a Chan story. So in the meditation hall, there was, among the meditators, a thief. And this thief was just stealing things off everyone. And so the other people went up to the master monk and said, let's get rid of him. He's stealing all our stuff. And the master monk was very stoic about it. And he said, well, if you want to go, you go. And they were all very curious. Why do you not ask the person who's the culprit to go, but rather you tell us to go? We were all normal. We follow all the rules. We did everything that you tell us to do. And so the master monk told them, you see, if you go out there, you can easily find somewhere, someone who will take care of you because you're all normal. You will listen to the rules, people will take you. But this particular fellow, nobody will take him. He'll have nowhere else to go. Therefore, I'll keep him here beside me and feed him. So it just reminded me of the story, Tam.
Yeah,
Actually,
that's beautiful. Thank you. Yes,
I could jump
Venerable
in with
Chokyi.
another story.
Yes.
So it reminded me as well that Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when Lama Zopa Rinpoche was alive and when coming to visit Australia, which didn't happen so often, and everyone would be lining up to get blessings and so forth. And invariably, Rinpoche would go to the person who was like the one that we thought was a waste of space, for whatever reason we thought, and would spend a lot of time with that person. And it reminds me also what Bhante was talking about in terms of the four faces and the immeasurable equanimity of having even regard, as the Buddha did, helping each and every sentient being, regardless whether they help, hinder, or do neither. And it also, when I was reflecting about this earlier, reminded me of the Venerable, and I've forgotten her name, at Dharma Cloud, I think, in Bilpin, who was describing how she was a businesswoman. So she has this enterprise back in Vietnam, and where at that place, everyone, it's similar to what you do, Tam, that everyone who works there is happily employed. If they've got difficulties, if they've got health, will look after their health. Everyone, including their families, can come and have a meal every day. So it's sort of like, well, let's look at it as a bigger picture, not pitching one individual against another, which divides us. Yeah.
Can I attempt to answer that question?
Yes, go ahead, Bhante.
My voice is heard. Yeah. Okay, it's an interesting question, but I would focus on what is compassion, and I gave my take on it before. One thing that is not present in compassion is dislike or hatred or enmity or indifference. Some people think that the opposite of love is hate, but I always think that the opposite of love is indifference. Hate, when you hate somebody, you have a relationship with them. It's a negative one, but if you hate somebody, you really take great note of what's happening. I mean, when you find that they've got a windfall, you feel so angry. So I would say that if a person is trying to maintain compassion and they have to make a hard decision of the type that you've talked about, they understand, or maybe they understand, that you can't help everybody. Many of the choices that you make disadvantage somebody to one degree or another. I would say that if you're trying to maintain compassion, what you would do is you would make sure that the choice you're going to make, or the person you are going to choose, the decision you make is not motivated by either indifference or hatred, and then you make your decision.
Thank you so much. That's great. Maggie, you had your hand up?
Yes, I'd like to add to that. In a world of interconnectedness and in such interbeing work together, from where I can often sit, it is as much about those who are staying as those who are going. So it is so connected. We can think about those who need to stay for their support, but can also still work within and advance. And for those who can, we have to make those really hard decisions, but we can support and know that they can actually be well and supported. So it's as much about those who are staying as well.
Thank you so much, Maggie. That's great.
If I could just jump back in, also, just a comment that Rhonda's put there, definitely ask for voluntary redundancy yourself, like, because one of the questions is about, do you go yourself? And harking back to a situation where I was made redundant in a job that I wasn't, like, a lot of redundancies had been happening. I told my job was safe. And then I was made redundant all of a surprise. And as a result, it gave me the time, and I could afford it, to go to the Dalai Lama. This was in 96, was it? When the Dalai Lama was in Australia, and go to those teachings over the next few weeks. And it was like, oh, a great gift, actually. So we never know what doors might be opening if we look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's right. Good, bad, who knows? Thank you so much. Cecile, you had your hand up. And you're on mute, Cecile. You have to unmute yourself. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I would like to share some unforgettable moments that I learned from Japan during the time of the leakage of the Fukushima nuclear plant. And this is not about redundancy, but who's going to do the cleanup, and getting exposed to all these nuclear elements would be fatal. And so automatically, the eldest scientists, those in the older ranks, volunteered and spared the young scientists from the work, saying that they have few remaining years to live, and that is fine. They can do the job, while the younger scientists had long way to go. The same time also during the Great Tsunami, there was this episode where in the food distribution, a policeman got his own lunchbox, but then he saw at the end of the line a little boy, 11 years old, waiting for his turn. So what he did was to take his lunchbox and gave it to the boy. And you know what the boy did? Went back to the table and put it back. So there's something in the Japanese culture that is already so entrenched when it comes to ethics, when it comes to compassion. There seems to be an orderly way by which they make decisions. And that's really admirable. Yeah, that's all.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Cecile. And any other thoughts? No?
If we don't have any other thoughts, maybe we can go to some of the questions that are in the chat.
Sure.
So the first question is actually for you, Tam.
Okay.
It's from Hi. I think I'm probably saying that incorrectly, but thank you so much for your sharing, Tam. It has really touched my heart, as I also work with students with learning difficulties. May I ask how you would balance between care and interference? Some students may feel uncomfortable or offended when we try to offer help, even though they have come to us for support.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much, HY, for that question. So I have an approach where I don't tell students what to do. I don't directly tell anyone what to do, because as one person trying to solve someone else's problems, you're never going to exactly know what it is in their life that is influencing them. If they can't figure out their own problems, how can an external person make the right decision for them? So as an approach, I never do that. The first thing I would do is really build up rapport and the confidence and the trust that that student would have in me to help them through their difficult time. That would be the first. And that looks very different in different scenarios. So, for example, if it's a male from, I'm sorry to say this, but a Middle Eastern background who aren't usually comfortable with a female telling them what to do, I would meet them several times. First time to listen, to find out, to let them know that there is support available, that I'm here. And I try and read from the gut, you know, what does my gut tell me about how they're traveling, what they need, how receptive they are to support. Then I would often make another appointment to see them again. And then I frame it very differently. I would frame it in terms of, I know times are tough for you. I know things are challenging. It means a lot to me if you would consider some of these possible, you know, avenues that you can pursue in order to help you in your current situation. So again, I frame it in a way that it would be, you know, we take your situation, you as a student, very seriously, and we're here to help. So again, not telling them what to do. And then even though I may have a preferred solution for them based on their situation, I wouldn't just tell them that. I would lay out several situations after hearing them out. Option A, option B, option C, option D, the pros and cons of each. I'll get their views on what they think and how to proceed. And slowly, if there's one obvious one, slowly get them to see you can do this or that, but you may want to consider this for these reasons. Again, never telling them what to do. But by that stage, they would trust you quite a lot to then take your advice. So that's how I would do it. So it's not interfering in their lives. It's not telling them what to do, but it's really being their partner. It's being a guide on the side and not a sage on the stage to help them through their difficulties. And with that, I find that they would trust you much more. They'll come back and update you about the difficulties, how they're progressing, if there are further challenges. It's more of that rather than telling someone. I mean, one person can't know in any measurable degree what someone else is going through. There is no way. Yeah.
Thanks, Tam. The next question is for Bhante, Dhammika. It's in the chat here, so I'll just read it out for you. Thank you so much for your sharing. Would we say suffering and happiness are the two sides of a coin? Would it mean when we look at suffering or dukkha, we would recognize happiness? How about people with depression? Would it be a good practice for them to sit down and look at their suffering, which might cause them some distress? Bhante, you're muted.
There. Okay, thank you for that question. Is suffering and happiness different sides to the same coin? I don't think so. I think, first of all, there are a whole range of different types of suffering, say physical and psychological. And then when you look at psychological, you know, guilt, shame, fear. And it's the same with happiness too. Now, in the early Buddhist idea of psychology, it talks about quite a range of different types of happiness. For example, the happiness of owning something, you know, being happy that you have this particular object of art or something like that. Then there's the happiness of being with others, the people you love. There are many different types of happiness. And I think that there is something like a hierarchy. So, Nibbānang Paramang Sukham, the highest happiness is Nirvana. I think there's also a hierarchy of unhappiness or suffering too. But from a Buddhist point of view, for as long as you're in samsara, it's probably better to feel happy than unhappy, but both of them have to be ultimately transcended by how you understand the nature of reality. Perhaps we appreciate happiness more if we have been unhappy previously. But the other side of that is perhaps we pine more for happiness when we're feeling unhappy. So that's how I see it. I'm not sure whether that answers your question, but you know, sometimes the question's the problem rather than finding an answer to it.
Thanks, Bhante. I'm going to keep moving through these questions, if that's okay with everybody. So the next one I think is for Venerable Thubten Chokyi, and it's about the Dalai Lama and the meditating kids. So it basically says, I'm interested in what the Dalai Lama said about meditation and world peace, because couldn't very selfish people practice meditation for their own reasons, like focusing on their business interests? So the question is really, can meditation by itself lead to peace, or isn't the intent also important? So how can the Dalai Lama know the intentions of the kids in that instance?
Yeah, thanks, Helena. That's an interesting question. Of course, intent is, is most important in whatever we do, whatever we say motivation or intention and so forth. So I think what the Dalai Lama was saying, what the Dalai Lama was saying, that is if children learnt at a very young age to meditate. So, for example, one time when Rachel Kahn was interviewing the Dalai Lama, and she said, it was a time of particular crackdown in Tibet, and she said, Aunt, how can you not get angry when you see what is happening to your country? And what His Holiness said was, I observe anger arise in the mind. I observe it fade away. I observe the anger. And he said, 1 minute. I observe it arise. I observe it fade away. He didn't say I get cognitively fused with it. I conflate with the anger. I become angry. He said, I observe it. And then he said, the reason I can do that is because I've meditated since I was 6 years old. We are talking about the Dalai Lama here, right? So, his motivation is going to be very pure. And so if you think about kids at a very young age, so the younger the better, they're like sponges. They just absorb everything, right? So that where there are programs where the kids do meditate and it's made to be fun and enjoyable and not something they have to do, then you do see a very natural, spontaneous response in that. However, you've got to also think that that has to be a sustained practice, as we know, over a long period of time, not just a one-off here and there. So I guess His Holiness was indicating there is a possibility for this. However, we think, if I can fold into HY's question as well, because it's on the same thing, on the same topic, that, programs for kids about meditating. So when at Vajrayana Institute, for example, that's where my experience of kids meditating, we started with babies. Of course, their parents were there. I don't know how much the babies meditated, but you should have seen the room. It had all these toys and there were all sorts of things there, soft because they're babies. But some of those kids grew up then in that, and they went to school and they kept coming back for meditation practice and so forth. And it was fun. It was like hugging trees was a meditation. Having a little fluffy toy on your belly and watching it go up and down was a meditation. So we get very creative about how we present that to a particular age group. So it's an enjoyable activity that they want to come back to. And of course, coming back to Helena's question about intention, I'd just like to say, like you've got the intention that couldn't really selfish people practice meditation. That's possible. They could practice meditation. I don't know how much they get from that with a negative intention. Working with the people in prison, there was one guy, two examples I'll use. One guy who, and he was the people who engage with liberation prison projects because they wanted to. Nobody was telling them they had to. They were interested in turning their lives around. And so one guy, this was his progress. He said, well, I put my soulmate's head down the toilet bowl, but then I pulled it out. Like he didn't continue to beat him up. So that was his progress. Another one said, there I was sitting in meditation and, it was all good. And then 5 minutes later, my soulmate pissed me off. And it's just like, well, you had those 5 minutes. isn't that a gift, right? So encouraging that, and some of course, the guys in the liberation prison protesters said they willingly came along and they really genuinely wanted to turn their lives around. And so many stories who did. So many stories of people turning their life around. One guy, we don't ask them what they did. He was a murderer. I mean, he told us, And then I see him outside of prison and he's working at not working paid, volunteering at the Dharma Center, helping out in the gardening, got a master's degree. Like, he's turned his life totally around. And he was somebody who finished a lot of Buddhist programs in prison because he had a long sentence. So I don't think everyone has to arrive in prison to be able to do that. It's not the preferred retreat place. But, it is, yes, it's about intention. And I appreciate what you're saying, Juewei, about it being, kids getting bored. And this is where it has to be fun and also very short, like a couple of minutes, 2 minutes even. Not sitting there, don't expect anyone to sit there for 20 minutes and not be bored. Pema, back to you. You've got a suggestion here.
Oh, that was just a private message.
Oh, I'm sorry. Zip. Oh, my God.
Zip, zip, zip.
I'll talk to you later.
I was just talking about
there are books about children's meditation, and we had some, I can't remember now, but there were some meditations for kids, recorded meditations.
Yeah. So I was just talking about resources for kids meditation. I said
kids activities in particular. There's one, it's sets of activities which includes meditations, is Ready, Set, Happy.
Yes, that's a great thing.
That's a great resource, which lots of activities. That's really fun.
All right. So I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. If people want to pop them in the chat or just pop your hands up, please go ahead and do that. We're going to try and end right on time because we do have a session immediately after this one, which is very exciting, and I do not want to be late for that. So if anyone has some questions for our eminent presenters, they're all still here. They're all still keen to chat and share. So please feel free to pop up your hand if you have a question or put it in the chat.
I've got a question for everyone. Maybe more Venerable Chokyi. Do you think it's compassionate for the human race not to continue to have kids if this is samsara and we're all suffering? Would that be the solution to ending suffering? Thanks.
It's a very interesting question. When I was much younger, of course, my mother had 6 kids, right? And when I was much, much younger, good Catholic mom. And when I was much, much younger, she would be, thinking, when is one of you going to have a kid? Because she loved kids, right? And then after a while, not only was the pressure off, I mean, this was long before I ordained, and she said to me, why would you want to bring another kid into this world, right? Like, don't have kids. Not that I was intending to anyway, but, I knew what my path was. However, if we think about it from a Buddhist perspective, and we talk about the fact that as a human being, we have that unique situation. We are hardwired for compassion. We're innately hardwired for compassion. You can say certain other mammals are as well. However, we also have the capacity to develop our mind to its utmost potential. So every single human being has that. So it's not so much deciding before a child's born what its trajectory is, but of course, those of us who are Buddhist and say, oh, we'll have a precious or a perfect human rebirth because we have all the conditions coming together to practice the Dharma. So it's not about how many humans there are in the world, but what you do with that human existence. This is all our intentionality. So I think rather than that, it's looking at education programs that are embedded in compassion, that activate that natural, sort of compassion within us and loving kindness, to really like the programs like the Tara Redwood School, it's based on 7 principles, or sort of looking at a values-based education. It doesn't have to have a religion involved in there, but very much based on that and nurturing that more and more within society.
We'll take one final question. Ming Fu has their hand raised, so go ahead.
Thank you for the session today. My question is, it may have already been answered, but I'm still very puzzled. Question is about people who are in drugs. Sometimes we love to help them, but we just can do so limited. We have limited strength to help them. So particularly people who are in such kind of situation, a drug situation, which I saw last night. The girl was screaming, "Why do you wake me up? Why can't you just let me sleep?" The feeling is not nice for many of us at the hospital. So what can we do to assist them when it's conditioned that she met maybe the wrong people that got her into drugs? That's one. Another is when I see my friends, I can only do the best I could, but there are situations where she need to get out of her ego self. So that's how I looked at it. So maybe I would like some insights on my question mark of my view yesterday I had.
Did you have was your question for any specific person, Ming, or just the panel in general?
Anybody.
So which of the panelists would like to jump in and provide
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Bhante.
In my years in Sri Lanka, I met many. No, that's not true. I met several quite remarkable people, and one of them who I spent a lot of time with was, I think, quite highly spiritually developed. And he was also very insightful and very good at explaining his ideas and that. And so there was a psychiatrist in Kandy who heard about him and was interested in what he had to say and interested in him as a person. And so he asked him, he said to him this, "Look, sometimes I have a patient which I really feel that I can't help very much. Would you mind if occasionally I send you a patient and you see if you can help them?" So he agreed to that. And occasionally that's what would happen. And there were several times when I happened to be there when one of these patients turned up. And I had the privilege of watching how he tried to deal with these people. And he would suggest meditation to them. He was talking to Sri Lankan people, many of whom are very pious Buddhists. So he'd always present his ideas from a Buddhist point of view, meditation, that sort of thing. And then he'd ask them to come the next week. And sometimes they would come, sometimes they wouldn't. And so when they didn't, he would get in a bus and go all the way to their place and talk to them there. Now, we're not talking about Australian buses, we're talking about Sri Lankan buses. Crammed to capacity, stinking hot, dirty, he would do that. But then I found out if he felt at any time that the person really wasn't making an effort, that is, he'd give them some sort of simple meditation technique, but they just wouldn't get around to it. Or the truth is, there are some people who are happy being miserable. They've been miserable or upset for so long, they don't know what it would be like to be better. And there are, unfortunately, such people. If ever he came to the conclusion that he couldn't help that person anymore, that was it, finish. And he would never give them another thought again. And once I asked him, "Gee, isn't that a bit hard?" He said, "Well, if I worry, if I get involved, if I keep pushing, etc., all my energy goes, energy that I could use for somebody perhaps that I could help." That's how I'd answer your question. And once again, it comes back to the thing is, you can't help everybody, because not everybody can be helped, or because of your limited capacities?
I'm afraid we're going to have to wind the panel up now in order to make the next panel. I just want to thank everyone for their presence here today, both the presenters and the participants. In terms of the presenters, I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, your stories, and your wisdom. This colloquium really has given us a lot to reflect on and think about. That's evidenced by the questions that have been asked. There's been so many kind of threads of kindness, compassion, learning, and connection. And I think that we're all going to take that away with us and sit with it for a while and use it to inspire further action. I want to thank everybody who was brave enough to contribute to the roundtable discussion by putting up their hand or putting up questions in the chat. I know that sometimes it's quite scary to ask questions in these kinds of venues, so I really appreciate your courage in doing so. And I just want to reaffirm our commitment in terms of presenters, myself, Humanistic Buddhism Centre and Tien Institute, that we have a commitment to exploring in an ongoing way the intersections of Dharma, education and compassion, and all in service of building communities rooted in kindness and care. So as we leave here, I'm hoping that we can take the messages we heard today with us and use them to inspire us to be more compassionate and to build our own compassionate futures. Please stay for the book discussion, which is about to happen. In this very same Zoom session, we'll be discussing the book Cultivating Compassion, Going Beyond Crises with the editors, Venerable Juewei, Stephen Hill and Suzanne Franzway. So once again, it's in this space. I'll pop a little slide up while we have a little bit of a break of literally 2 or 3 minutes, and then we will start the book discussion. Thank you everyone for your time. Have a fantastic remainder of your weekend. Talk to you all soon, hopefully, or see you all soon in the compassionate communities that we are participating in. Thanks everyone.